Okay, welcome and thank you for joining this module in our series of freedom learning sessions that have been created to provide an opportunity for our learning community to develop their life skills. Now, the subject that we are going to focus on in this series of short videos is problem solving and decision making. And if you think about it, we are confronted with the need to make decisions literally every day. Some of them are small and easy, such as what clothes to wear today, whereas others could be much more important and significant, as should we buy a house, or is it time for me to look for a new job? Now, the consequences of making the wrong or a bad decision, of course, are directly proportionate to the impact of where your decisions take you. The objective of this series of videos is to look at some useful techniques to help ensure that when you have a big decision to make in your life, that you're giving yourself the best chance of making the right choice. So let's get started, and we'll start with a very quick question. A bat and a ball costs $1.10, and the bat costs $1 more than the ball. So how much does the ball cost? Once you think you've got the correct answer, just write it down on a piece of paper. Okay, the correct answer is in fact 5 cents. Now, some of you may well have acted quickly and made the assumption that the answer is 10 cents, which on the face of it sounds pretty logical. But if you spend a little bit more time thinking about the question, you'll realize the following. If the bat costs $1 more than the ball, then if the ball is 10 cents, then the bat will be $1.10, and therefore the combined costs would actually be $1.20. So if we know that the combined cost is $1.10 and the ball costs 5 cents and the bat is $1 more than the ball, then the bat would need to be $1.05 plus the 5 cents for the ball to equal the $1.10. Now, this simple question is a great example of how we use our fast-thinking brain to make quick decisions, which sometimes, as in this case, for some of you, may well have been wrong. So why is this case study important? As we'll see later in this program, there are some traps that exist in the way that we think, which we need to be aware of in order to make sure that the decisions that we take are well considered and based on facts as well as logic, and avoid different biases that occur in our brains. More about that a little bit later. Let's just ask another question. When it comes to you making big decisions, what would you say best describes your approach? A useful first step in developing your decision-making skills would be to evaluate where your decision-making approach is right now and ask the question, is there room for me to improve on my performance in this area? And as with the program on stress, understanding the root causes of stress and why it happens is a major part of learning how to manage your stress. And I feel with problem solving and decision making, the same applies. So if we take time to understand what drives our decision making and the reasons that perhaps we sometimes get it wrong, that would be a great starting point for improvement. So our first key learning on decision making comes from a Nobel Prize winner called Daniel Kahneman, who has written a number of articles and also books on insights based on his psychological research into human judgment and decision making. His book, entitled Thinking Fast and Slow, shows you how two systems in your brain are constantly fighting over control of your behavior and actions, and teaches you the many ways in which this leads to errors in memory, judgment, and decisions, and what you can do about it. So I'd recommend the book. It's a great read. Let's quickly dive into the two thinking systems that we have just talked about and the lessons that we can learn from this research. So our system one thinking is automatic and impulsive. System one thinking operates very, very quickly and with little or no effort, and there's no sense of voluntary control. So some examples here could be how you detect that one object is farther away than another, or how you might detect sadness in a voice, understanding simple sentences, or drive a car on an empty road without concentrating. These are all examples of System 1 type thinking. System 2 type thinking, on the other hand, is a very conscious, very aware and considerate type of thinking, and it helps you to exert a self-control and deliberately focus your attention on whatever your thinking is designed to deal with. The system is at work when you're meeting a friend, for example, and trying to spot them in a huge crowd of people, as it helps you recall how they look and filter out all of these other people. You'll recognize this when you're trying to look for somebody in a busy place. And System 2 is one of our most recent additions to our brain, and only a few thousand years old in terms of the evolution of our thinking systems. But it's what helps us succeed in today's world, where our priorities have shifted from getting food and shelter to earning money and supporting a family and making complex decisions. So it's important to know and understand that these two systems don't just perfectly alternate or work together. They often fight over who's in charge, and this conflict determines how you act and behave. And so another key lesson we learn from our understanding of these two thinking systems is that your brain is actually naturally quite lazy and causes you to make intellectual errors. And the bat and the ball test earlier is a great example of our lazy brain thinking. So when System 1 faces a tough problem it can't solve, it'll call System 2 into action to work out the details. But sometimes your brain perceives problems, as in the bat and ball challenge, as simpler than they actually are. And so System 1 thinks it can handle it, even though it actually can't, and you end up making a mistake. So finally, another great lesson we learn from our understanding of how our two thinking systems works relates to money. And when you're making decisions about money, it's important to leave your emotions at home. And so let me just explain that through a couple of scenarios. So imagine these two scenarios. Firstly, you're given $1,000, and then you have the choice between receiving another fixed $500 or taking a 50% gamble to win another $1,000. Scenario 1. Or scenario 2, you're given $2,000, then you have the choice between losing $500 fixed or taking a gamble with a 50% chance of losing another $1,000. Which choice would you make for each of those scenarios? Well, if you're like most people, you would rather take the safe $500 in scenario 1, but the gamble in scenario 2. Yet the odds of ending up with $1,000, $1,500 or $2,000 are exactly the same in both scenarios. And the reason has to do with something called loss aversion. We're a lot more afraid to lose what we already have, as we're keen on getting more. We also perceive value based on reference points. Starting at $2,000 makes you think you're in a better starting position, which you want to protect. And then lastly, we get less sensitive about money the more we have. The loss of $500 when you have $2,000 seems smaller than the gain of $500 when you only have $1,000. So you're more likely to take a chance. So you've got to be aware of these things, and just knowing your emotions try to confuse you when it's time to talk money will help you make better decisions. Try to consider statistics and probability, and when the odds are in your favour, act accordingly. Just don't let the emotions get in the way where they've got no business. After all, rule number 1 for any good poker player is leave your emotions at home. Don't bring them to the table.